Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? Hi, welcome to the Unbelief Podcast. I'm Jeremy, and I'm here with Andrew Zirschky. Andrew has a PhD from Princeton, and he also is the research professor of youth ministry at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And we're going to talk progressive youth ministry today, which some people, it may be the first time they've even heard this idea. Because one of the things that you do is you run the Progressive Youth Ministry Conference that's coming up in November. If you've got a youth pastor, if you volunteer, I'll tell you, go to their website and check it out. It's going to be incredible. I will be there, so we can meet and hang out if you show up. So I guess really at the beginning, just sort of as an initial question, when you say progressive youth ministry, what do you mean?
Well, in the history of the organization, the right response has always been, tell us what you mean.
Right. Well, that's a very progressive response.
Right? Partially because it's a matter of just kind of keeping a wide tent, but also I think in certain circles, progressive comes with all kinds of baggage, and other circles it just comes with, what is this? When Austin Seminary got involved with the conference a couple of years ago, we said we need to have some kind of handhold to it. And so the way that I describe it is that progressive youth ministry is about forming young people in a faith that is just, inclusive, and compassionate in the ways of Jesus. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
For sure.
But I think it establishes a baseline of what we're talking about. We're not just talking about some kind of dogmatic faith that espouses, historic creeds. We are zooming in on the heart of what we believe Jesus' ministry was about, and the kind of faith that I think Jesus was interested in seeing formed in disciples. Loving, compassionate, just, and inclusive.
Yeah. Loving, compassionate, just, and inclusive. I love that. So I know that you and I did not grow up in a progressive space. Was there a moment or like a sort of a period of time that was a turning point for you? I guess really not just personally, but mostly professionally in youth ministry, like wanting to kind of take things in a different direction.
Yeah, what's so interesting about that? Like, I grew up in a weird context, I guess. I didn't, you never know when you're growing up that it's weird until you look back and go, like, oh, that's different.
Right.
And I hear so many stories of people that grew up in like oppressive fundamentalist Southern Baptist kind of backgrounds. What I didn't realize is I was growing up in a fairly conservative but Jesus people kind of environment. My earliest memory of church was Calvary Chapel in Costa Mesa, just a few years after they got themselves off the beach and into a building. And, I grew up in a context where, a little bit later on in elementary school, I just assumed everybody had a female worship leader who played the electric guitar on Sunday mornings, like early 80s. That made sense. Right. And my mom was a leader in women's ministry in Portland, Oregon, like around the entire city. And so there were aspects of my growing up that were very different. But I was also in a fairly conservative congregation where I spent time as a middle schooler going to prophecy conferences and, like end times prophecy, urban kind of stuff, like where's the mark of the beast? And I was all in as middle school, into like, where's the mark of the beast? And Ken Ham from ICR, Institute for Creation Research,
Yeah.
was literally, when I got to meet Ken Ham.
Oh my gosh, you met him.
Signed my book as an eighth grader, like,
oh my gosh,
deal for me. And I failed English in eighth grade, second semester, because I gave a 20-minute talk. It was supposed to be 4 on evolution versus creation.
Oh my God.
So this is the soup that I was stirred in, but at the same time, like, I'm in these contexts where, women in ministry was not debated at all, and where justice issues, social justice was huge. So I guess I grew up in a very odd context. For me, there were a couple places along the way where I started to see a disconnect, between aspects of the church environment that I had been a part of. And there were, I think, 3 big ones. One was in college, when I was preparing for youth ministry, thinking that everybody had this kind of social justice outlook on things because it was so embedded in my understanding of the gospel, which, by the way, came from Bible quizzing. I was a national champion Church of the Nazarene Bible quizzer.
Really? That's really what we should have introduced you as. Who cares about Princeton? National champion Church of the Nazarene Bible quiz.
1993.
Wow. Do you get a trophy for that, or like a plaque? Like, what's the reward?
Trophies and
what? Okay, so what's on top of that trophy? I'm sorry, I'm digressing, but what's on top of that trophy?
Well, that trophy currently is in a box somewhere. I don't want to be
what's the topper for a Bible quiz trophy? Is there a book?
It's usually a lamp of knowledge. Usually.
Oh, right.
But every once in a while, you'll get like a Holy Spirit flame kind of thing.
Okay. No, I feel that.
Sometimes a dove.
Oh, right. Okay,
so an open book.
Open book. See, that's what I was thinking. But the flame, I think, is interesting. So I'm sorry. Back to the thing. So you are in the world. You're starting to have some. Are you a youth pastor at this point?
Well, no. I'm just in college, studying to be a youth pastor, but realizing that people have a very different understanding of what it means to live out Christian faith than I did. Coming in from having memorized the Beatitudes and and truthfully the entire book of Matthew, but that's a whole other story. Like, I just even to this day my progressive outlook on things, which whether or not it's really that progressive is debatable, but my progressive outlook on things comes from just diving into the words of Jesus. And so that was the first kind of place, was in college, going like, whoa, people have a very different understanding of faith than I did in a lot of ways. I think the second place, I was fast forward another 10 years or so, and I was in youth ministry in southern Idaho in a conservative congregation overall, and I started blogging because that was the thing to do in 2003, and started realizing that my perspectives on the way that faith and politics and a variety of other things came together diverged greatly from members of my congregation. I'll never forget in 2000, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, I guess I did forget. One of those years, there was an earthquake in Iran, and George Bush withheld American aid. And I wrote a blog article that, as a youth pastor in a conservative church, that was entitled "Why George Bush is Going to Hell."
So that got you a lot of goodwill from the congregation.
Well, what's funny about it is I didn't get a ton of pushback. I got maybe that's a little bit of hyperbole there,
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, it's probably a little, but I was just outraged that here's this president who was claiming a Christian identity, who was withholding aid from people who were buried under buildings.
Right.
And then I think that the big shift for me came when I applied and was accepted to Princeton Seminary, which is a whole other, I didn't even know Princeton had a seminary. I was kind of amazed to find out. And And then I learned that if you got in, you go for free. And I was like, sign me up. I was 10 years into youth ministry at this point, and had been out of school for a while and needed to get a degree to keep going, because I felt this lifelong call to ministry. And when I went off to Princeton, I was pretty well convinced that I was like going into the lion's den in a lot of ways. Yeah. Like, these are going to be these, wacky people who don't want to talk about Jesus and who, worship Sophia and, dance on graves and sacrifice goats. And and the pastor at the church I was at, who I greatly respected, prayed that I wouldn't lose my faith at godless Princeton the Sunday that I left that congregation.
Wow.
And then I walked into the classroom at Princeton and was astounded at the deep faith and the deep love for Christ and for people that came from the professors and students that were there. And suddenly I was in this like alternative universe where I didn't know that a progressive outlook on faith existed that was still rooted in something other than, superstition.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'd love to hear from you is, nothing's perfect. So I'm not saying that there is that everything about progressivism is the exact right thing. In fact, I think really to be progressive, one of the things you have to recognize is that you're wrong, right?
Right.
Is that you're open to that. However, I'm curious, for people who have taking their teenagers to youth ministries, and maybe they're in a more conservative area, maybe it's a more conservative church. Youth ministry can still be effective even in a conservative context. It can be helpful, but what are the damaging things? Like if there's a parent that's would love to like say, okay, but what do I need to look out for? As a sign of like, oh, this has some of these conservative values that ultimately are going to be unhealthy. Like, what are the practices? What are the things that their kid might come home and say that you would look at them and say, look, if you hear this, you need to look a little bit deeper.
Yeah. I think that's a really great question. And I appreciate that you preface it with like, there can be some places that have an elements of conservative faith that aren't damaging.
Right.
That being said, there are a lot.
That being said,
as you and all your viewers know, like there are plenty of aspects that are potentially damaging. I think often it's a matter of. I think the first thing I would tell parents is get to know who the leaders are.
Right.
Here I was in this conservative congregation in Southern Idaho, where. Early 2000s, where I was having kids come out to me as being LGBTQ. And my response to that at the time, even being in a place of ambivalence myself at the time, not
sure. Yeah.
I don't know how I respond to that. My response to that was always incredible embrace and love. And this is who you are, and we're going to work through that.
Right. So I guess sort of to extrapolate that into like a warning sign for parents, if their kid comes back and talks about a queer kid coming and not being accepted or being told that they're going to hell or that sort of stream of thinking, it's time to like have a meeting, get a little bit more information about what's going on in this youth ministry, because and you and I both know that like the research on when religious communities reject queer kids who are coming out, they're twice as more likely to try to unalive themselves. Curious, what's another thing that?
Well, I think so. so getting to know the leaders and figuring out, regardless of what the theology of the congregation is, how dogmatic are the actual leaders of the youth ministry and the congregation actually?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have a pastoral element to what they're doing? Or is it just straight up dogma?
Right.
And I think that's a hugely protective aspect. My own 17-year-old still attends actually a Nazarene congregation that that I actually started the youth ministry at back in 2013 or 2011, right before I left actually the Church of the Nazarene. He still attends. He's a trans boy. And the church is not in any way, shape, or form welcoming and accepting on paper. But the particular pastors at that church have made a space for him in which he feels loved and accepted, and that he wants to be there, that this is his place. That's key. Now, as soon as those leaders leave,
we might have
time to go back in and go, okay, what's really happening here? So I think leadership is huge. Second thing I'd say is trying to figure out how they teach about purity culture.
Yes.
Like the purity culture issue is key. As I'm sure many of the people who are watching this know, like it was incredibly harmful for them, and it can still be incredibly harmful for young people today. And so trying to find out how sexuality and gender and and love and dating and relationships is addressed in the congregation, I think is huge. I think understanding third, the roles that young people are placed into based on gender stereotypes and gender norms is another huge area to ask. And immediately I think some people are like, my kid isn't trans, my kid isn't gay. No, that's not what I mean.
Right.
Like our boys pigeonholed into particular ways of understanding their masculinity and their identity as a man, and in very similar ways are there ways that young women are pigeonholed in very negative ways.
And I've both of those two things, right? The purity culture and the gender roles are sort of sometimes bound up in the same same piece. And I've talked to and interviewed on our podcast a bunch of different people who, like myself, like I'm queer, but I also, growing up in sort of the Deep South and youth group, like the option for me was play football outside, and you either had your shirt on or your shirt off, and talk about football, or I was sort of, or like I could play music, right? Those were the two options for me to engage in that sort of masculine culture. I didn't watch sports. I didn't care about sports. I was a theater kid. And that those gender roles are really harmful, because one of the things that's really important for, one of the things that's really helpful, and one of the reasons to have your kid involved in a youth group, is a sense of community and acceptance and belonging. And when the gender roles are so harsh, they can't experience that if they aren't in those narrow things. Right. And then on the purity culture at that side, I mean, like, so damaging. So many women that were taught that like their bodies were something to be ashamed of, that when that their bodies were the cause of the sin of the boys or of males, and that then males are able to opt themselves out of really harmful actions because, well, it wasn't my fault. They caused me to stumble because they had one woman told me on the podcast, cross body purse. They were told not to wear that because it accentuated their boobs and was causing the youth pastor to sin. So let's talk a little bit about the youth pastor themselves, and what are some warning signs in the youth pastor that people should look out for? I mean, honestly.
Yeah, I think you're wanting to look for somebody with humility.
Yeah.
Which you would think would come along with a lot of youth ministry, and it doesn't. I've experienced a lot of people who are trying to prove themselves as valuable in youth ministry, and one of the ways that youth ministry attracts those kind of folks is that they somehow are placed into a role of adulation by young people, and they feed off of that.
Yeah,
that's a huge danger.
Yeah,
huge danger.
It's a huge danger, and I think one of the things that also happens in concert with that is, I call it friend zoning, but where the youth pastor is really not in that role as youth pastor, but that adulation then becomes like, we're going to be friends.
Right.
And then sometimes that can also translate into, because they're sort of reliving their own adolescence, I'm going to be friends with people I was friends with, the type of kids I was friends with when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And the other kids not.
I think, your insight that sometimes people in youth ministry are reliving their adolescence is helpful. With my students, I point to the fact that this is the reason that we have a hard time recruiting volunteers into middle school ministry. Because no one wants to go back to middle school, and invariably, like, walk into a middle school youth room sometime and you will feel all of those feelings of fear and displacement that you felt walking down the hall as a middle schooler. It's like trauma all over again.
Absolutely.
And so, sometimes people will gravitate to the kids that they gravitated to when they were a teenager. Sometimes they will gravitate to anyone who will affirm them. And so sometimes we end up with people in youth ministry who are like, dang, I wasn't popular during high school. I'm going to try this all over again. And I don't think anybody's out there saying that.
No, it's subconscious,
but it does become something that is trigger. So,
and I think what happens, when that happens, if it's sort of paired with this, like, becoming friends, there's a danger. My experience is one of the red flags with any youth pastor that I've ended up seeing go in a really, not great direction, is when the kids become their friends and not the students in their youth group. They are blurring this relational boundary to a point that all kinds of unhealthy things can end up happening. And so I'd say that if a parent sees, like, the youth pastor being friends, right? Like, let's go to the movie with a couple of the kids. I'm going to go over to their house and play video. Like, we're just doing friend stuff. It might be fine, but it's something to look out for.
Yeah. I do some expert witness work on the side with injury and sex abuse cases, almost always on the plaintiff's side against churches, largely because churches don't do what they should to prevent abuse and injury. And the thing that has come out of that work is, number one, we know factually that the vast majority of youth workers or people who are working with children and youth in congregations who offend are very close to the age of the people they're working with.
Yeah,
our impression in our head is, it's going to be the 40-year-old guy who is preying on kids, and almost always it is somebody between 20 and 26 who is themselves still in a place of development in some way, and who is seen as a friend or close confidant with the youth, or seen by the youth even as a a little bit older friend or an older sibling or that kind of thing, and that allows for these problems to happen. And so another thing I'd say is, like, look at the age of who's being allowed to lead in this congregation. And that's not to negate the ability for people who are 24, 25, 26 doing fantastic ministry, but who's being allowed to lead? What training do they have?
Yes.
What accountability do they have? What integrative role do they have with the rest of the ministry staff? Are they just sent off on their own with the youth, or do they have other roles throughout the church? All of these things are telling you whether they're being supervised well, whether they're being prepared well, and whether they themselves are actually being protected from falling into the kinds of
patterns
and patterns that ultimately lead people where they don't want to go. I'm firmly convinced after doing the expert witness work that I've done that there are very few people who actually walk into a church going, I'm going to prey on kids.
Right. Yeah.
I'm here to, find some kids. There are some.
Yep.
But I have listened over and over again to people sobbing, saying, I never intended for this to happen. And I tend to believe most of those folks that they fell into patterns and problems that preyed on their weaknesses. And they might have been able to avoid that if the church had given them better accountability, better support, better guidance, and better boundaries. So all of those things I think are important for parents to watch for. It's not trying to suss out, is this youth worker a pedophile? I think the bigger question is this church protecting young people? Yes. Ensuring that they don't have somebody who is or could become a pedophile by just letting them, go off on it alone in ministry. Yeah.
So one last warning sign question, and then we'll wrap up. But tell me about doubts and questions. This is one of the things that, in my experience, is the most common thing that is, if you look for a progressive or a conservative church, it is one of the most common differentiators. Tell me about how they approach that and what is going on inside developmentally teenagers that you need a certain approach to that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the other side of doubt is dogma. And I think
and for people who aren't familiar with that word, what is dogma?
Dogma is this set of beliefs that are concrete, constructed, and unchallengeable in a lot of settings. And I think what we're seeing right now in this resurgence in the United States among bold conservatism is the way that I think I would name it for the moment. Bold conservatism that is saying this is the way, and anything outside of this is not Christian. I mean, get on TikTok and just, or get on X right now and just look at the, what's being said by people in conservative traditions this way. There's this this is the only way to be a Christian. This is the only way to believe. And that's dogma. And that obviously stands not only in stark contrast to doubt and questioning, which are healthy, actually important ways that young people have to grow in faith. It is in fact the only way that faith can grow. So I'll come back to in a second. So you've got doubt on one side and you've got dogma really on the other. And when you end up in dogmatic traditions, it feels good and attractive to some folks because there are firm answers and everything is black and white and this is how it is, until you find yourself questioning but is that black and white? And then you're excised from the group. Right. So what happens in a lot of congregations is what I would call the pushing away of doubt. You're doubting? No, you need to go take care of that somewhere else because you might infect the rest of the group with your doubts. And so you need to step down from being on the worship team. You need to maybe not come to the Bible study. Like, no, the mission trip this summer is not for you because you have doubts. And that is so destructive for young people because they end up doubting alone. They end up doubting alone.
Well, and it's just communicating, like you said, that it's, doubt is a healthy thing. It helps your faith grow. And so it is through trauma, planting deep inside them, that having questions and having doubts is a problem, something they should be ashamed of and afraid of and avoid, or at least, if they've expressed it and then they let go, at least avoid saying out loud. It's often put in those terms. The problem with progressive congregations, though, can be the opposite. And it can be just as problematic, which is also ignoring doubts and going like, oh, well, you're doubting, everybody doubts. Like, it's fine. Here, go grab a donut, hang out with us, have a cup of coffee in the fellowship hall, and then we'll talk about other things. Yeah.
And in both of those circumstances, no one engages the doubt.
Yes.
In your conservative traditions, it's pushing it away, go doubt alone. And a lot of progressive and mainline traditions, it's like, oh yeah, doubts happen, don't worry about it. And no one's engaging the doubt. And so young people actually end up doubting alone in both traditions. Yeah. I think what we have to reclaim, and what great churches are doing, are creating spaces in which young people, number one, know that doubt isn't just welcomed, it's necessary.
Yeah.
And secondly, that they are providing guides through the experience of doubt, exegetes of doubt. Exegeting is kind of this, like, trying to pull apart what's happening in the doubt and helping you understand it. But basically guiding you through the doubt.
Right.
Whitewater rafting is dangerous unless you have a guide. Yeah. And it's not so dangerous in the end, but it's an incredible growth point. And I think doubt is very similar. It's dangerous unless you have somebody who can really walk with you, not toward a predetermined answer. Right.
And that's the important thing, not in service of the dogma.
Right. Not in service of the dogma. Right. And so one of the things I've always done with middle school students, even going back to the time when I was in a conservative church in Idaho, was in sixth grade when we'd bring young people into the youth ministry. We'd have their parents come in and we'd have everybody draw a picture of what they thought God looked like when they were 6. Not what God looked like when God was 6. That's a whole other story. But what did you think God looked like when you were 6 years old? And of course we get, strong men on clouds, kings on thrones, and old gray guys with beards. Sometimes we get rainbows and sunshine. And then I have people turn the page over and I say, okay, I want you to draw or describe what you think God looks like now at the age you are. Like, wow. And people are like, I don't know if I can draw that. Well, you couldn't draw a stick figure either very well, but like, you can use words. I'll let you use words. And invariably, no one has the same image. The youth don't have the same image they had at 6, and of course, adults don't either. And I'm like, and my question always is, how did this change? Well, I learned things, and I, read more of the Bible, or I, was exposed to different ideas, or I experienced life, and all of these things are good. But at the end of the day, my point is, you didn't get from 6-year-old understanding of God to where you are now without doubting what you used to believe. Yes. You had to doubt at some point that 6-year-old understanding of God and go, oh, wait a second, maybe it's not right. Right. And more than that, whatever image of God you have now is still just a stick figure compared to the ineffable, reality of who God is. Yeah. So our theology is always stick figure theology. Yeah. It's always stick figures of who God is. And I encourage, and part of the reason I do this is to encourage parents that, like, actually what I want your young people to experience in youth ministry from 6th grade through 12th grade is doubting what they currently believe. Because if they graduate from high school with the same faith that they came in to 6th grade believing, then we failed, because they're going out with a poor stick figure understanding of God. We want to move them along a little ways. And so doubt not only is welcome, it's necessary, and we're going to encourage it in certain ways because it's the way that faith actually grows. And because what is happening in that is that we are developing a muscle that is, when doubt isn't engaged,
whether in progressive circles or conservative circles, we're not engaging the muscle that helps you take in data, evaluate it, and choose your beliefs.
Right.
And that's the thing that either of those things, because what happens, my feeling is I don't like the term deconstruction, but when people use that term, my experience is often the problem, the sort of baseline problem, was that they were never taught how to choose beliefs that work for them. They never developed that muscle, that skill, because they were in some sort of tradition that stopped short of that basically gave them, often gave them inherited beliefs.
Right.
And so then when they have a question, when they get to an adult, when they go through a difficult time, or oftentimes it starts in college, they're confronted with something that disagrees with the dogma. They have no way to reconcile it. They have no way to doubt health in a healthy way. Right. And everything starts to fall apart. So yeah, man, I 100% agree with you. So Andrew runs, is one of the people who runs the Progressive Youth Ministry Conference. And if you are a person who engages in youth ministry and you can get to Austin for this conference, it's going to be incredible. But Andrew, just give us a sort of elevator pitch. What is the Progressive Youth Ministry Conference? And make sure you tell us the website that we need to go to.
Yeah, so Progressive Youth Ministry is an organization devoted to helping those that are leading children, youth, and young adults. We take a wide view of what we mean by youth. Those that are helping children, youth, and young adults develop faith that is just, inclusive, and compassionate in the ways of Jesus. And so everything at the conference is geared toward helping leaders build that kind of faith in young people. We've got keynote speakers this year: Brian McLaren, Ken DeCreasy Dean, Patrick Reyes, Terrence Mayo, a variety of folks across the spectrum, 20 plus workshops in tracks in youth, children, and young adult ministry. And it's a great time to find not only resources, but kind of find your people. We have 30 plus exhibitors that are coming that are all progressive organizations, from mission trip organizations to seminaries to ministry curriculum producers. And it's a great place to find resources, find books, find people that you really resonate with. November 13th through the 15th on the campus of Austin Seminary and University United Methodist in Austin. It's kind of a split venue conference. You can find us at pym.events/2025. That's the easiest way to get to us, pym.events/2025. And you'll find out more about the conference there.
Yeah. And I'm going to be there too.
Yeah.
So if any of you are listening or watching and you think you might show up, look for me. I'd love to have coffee and meet you in person. Andrew, thanks so much for being on the Unbelief podcast. If you're listening to this, we would really appreciate you sharing this. This would be a great thing to share with a pastor or a youth pastor in your life, and rate us, give us all the stars or a comment that's saying that we don't suck, whatever. It all really helps. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place. Okay? We'll see you next time.